Hi, Gaye DeRusso with the Majestic Rider. So today I'd like to talk to you about hay nets. The purpose of hay nets is to slow your horse down from eating too fast. It keeps the food off of the ground so they're not eating sand or shavings, so it's much cleaner for them, and then it gives your horse something to do. When they're eating from a hay net, if the holes are small enough in the hay net, they have to grab the hay and then pull it out. They also have to think how to do that, how to use their lips, and then they also use their teeth. That's something they do in the wild. If you just throw in a couple of flakes of hay, what do? They just stand there and they eat, and that's it. So this takes up their time, it uses their brain, and it actually makes them eat slower so the hay lasts longer. If you haven't noticed, we have a big problem with obesity in horses. And a lot of that is because people get them and then they don't ride them enough, and then they feel bad and they give them more food. We do that with dogs too. You don't walk them, you feel bad, they're begging, you just give them food. Okay? So the only way they get obese is usually from us giving them stuff, unless they're loose and they're able to get it themselves. So what people don't think of is in the wild, they have to walk, and many times they walk anywhere from 20 to 30 miles to find food and water. And there's not that many wild horses anymore, is there? We've domesticated all of them. Well, we've domesticated many of them, okay? So now they stand in a 12 by 12 stall, or they might be lucky and have a paddock or a pasture, but they get hay, and once they get the hay, they just stand there and eat. So they're not using any energy. So again, in the wild, they walk, they eat. They walk, they eat. So that way, it maintains their weight, but here we don't, and that's why they get obese. The other thing in the wild, they don't find, they don't walk up and go, oh, there's a bale of hay here, because if they did, they would eat it all and get a little bit fat. So in the wild, they find some food, they eat it there, that's gone, then they go somewhere else, find some more food, and then they're scrounging, they're using their teeth on different things, they eat all different varieties of grasses out there. Here, sometimes we're giving them grasses or hays that are rich in sugar. So then we start to give them some insulin problems, okay? So even if you say, well, I don't use a hay net because my horse is in pasture, you want to do something about that, because the same thing, the horses in the wild don't walk up and find a whole grass area that lasts for acres and acres, do they? No, and that's why we have another problem with horses getting laminitis and founder and all sorts of things, because people think, well, they're supposed to eat grass, and you just let them loose out there and you don't control how much grass they're getting or how much sugar they're getting. So I recommend to use hay nets if you're feeding hay. If you're feeding grass, I would recommend that you have somewhere that's a dry lot so the horse isn't on grass the entire time, and you regulate how much he is eating grass. If they're in pasture and they're eating grass and you have a fair amount of pasture, you don't need to feed them any extra hay. Sometimes people do both. The horse is eating grass and he's getting hay. No, if he's got grass, he doesn't need hay. You want to watch their weight. You can, there's measuring tapes and you can see their weight, but if they're getting ribby, you can see their ribs, you give them more food. If you can't see the ribs at all, you need to back off on the food, okay? We think that's normal, but you should actually be able to see a couple of ribs. So ask your vet, how is your horse's weight? And then you need to maintain it, because since we lock them up, they can't maintain it themselves. So if you have a horse that's not working and all he's doing is eating, then you need to feed him less, or you need to put a muzzle on, or he needs to be in a dry lot. Give him other things to do. Use a hay net, use a hay ball, get some kids to come over and hand walk them, or give them exercise, but they need something. And every time you feel bad, try not to give them food or cookies. You'll see I use it for different things in training, but that's the only time I'm giving them cookies. I'm not walking around just handing out cookies. I use it as a training tool, and then the horses are exercised many hours a day. And so their weight stays pretty good. But I have some, just like people, that their metabolism is much less and they can't eat very much, or if they do, they're immediately going to get fat. So those horses I feed much less. I don't give them, if I give one horse 2 flakes, I might give him a flake, or I might give him half a flake if he's overweight, and then I'm going to exercise him more. So if you love your horse, try not to overfeed it, watch its weight, use hay nets or muzzles or dry lots. Control how much they are eating, because by them just eating all the time, you create more problems than the horse was actually getting skinny. So I did talk to the vet one time and I said, if people go to extremes, so would it be better if your horse was too skinny or too fat? And he said too skinny. He said because it's not going to get laminitis founder, it's not going to get any insulin problems, and of course you can feed it and then it get its weight up. But he said if it gets too fat, you're going to have major problems. And once they get laminitis and founder, it's not like you can go back and take that off. And then, of course, nobody wants that horse once they hear that they've had laminitis, because they know they're going to have feet problems all their life. So make sure if you love that horse, you exercise them, you give them food, but you keep it, their weight under control. And if you feel bad for them, instead of feeding them food, take them for a walk, give them some exercise, teach them some tricks, do something with them, or just spend time with them, but try not to overfeed them. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about hay nets. Why would you use a hay net? Because it slows your horse down from eating so fast. If you throw them in food, they're usually done in an hour. This also imitates the normal feeding behavior, where they got to pick at stuff and eat it, and it takes them longer to eat. So this is more natural. And then a lot of horses, this horse is in good condition, but he shouldn't get any fatter. A lot of horses eat so quickly, and then people feel bad because they eat so quick, so they give them more, and then they get fat. And then they wonder why their horse has insulin problems. So we overfeed them and we do not work them enough. So this is a way to slow down their feeding and give them less food, and then you won't feel so bad. Okay? So you'll see he's got to pick, he's got to use his lips, he's got to use his brain. So there's lots of things that the hay nets do, and I like them a lot. The horses wait for their food, and it takes them much longer to eat. This is another one. This is a foxtrotter, and foxtrotters in Rocky Mountains hold their weight much easier. So lots of people are still feeding them 2-3 flakes at a time, and you should feed them much slower, like maybe just a flake, especially if you're not exercising them much. Okay, remember, if they're not exercising, they get less food. He's more of a baby, he likes to play with stuff. See, I came over and he stopped eating. So we want to make sure this entertains him for a while. So same thing, if they're growing, they can have a little bit more food. So you'll see his hay bag has more food in it, and he's also a much bigger horse, so that's another reason. So you want to entertain them, give them things to think about, use their brain, and this way they learn how to figure things out. How do you get the food out of the net? It's a little bit smaller, has good weight. Okay, so he has a little bit more than the buckskin had because he's in work, so he can have more food. But you'll see he's calmly just eating. Okay, this guy doesn't rush so much to eat his food. He has a different hay bag, has bigger openings. So this depends what bag. I like them a little bit smaller openings like the other ones you saw than this. But this guy is seeming to do fine with it. He's also a younger horse growing, so good weight.